Hey, what's good, everybody? It's Asher Underwood here, and I'm in front of the Confederate Sailor and Soldiers Monument outside of Cook County Courthouse in Gainesville, Texas, my hometown, home of my ancestors. Since 1853 is when my great-great-great-grandfather and my great-great-great-grandmother came to Gainesville when it was Liberty, Texas, before it was Gainesville. And so my ancestors have been here for quite a long time. I'm doing this video not just for the general public, but specifically to the friends and the family and people I went to school with and played sports growing up here in Gainesville, Leopard and Panther Pride, you know what I'm saying? I'm reaching out to y'all, all my Facebook friends, and everybody that's been following the events that's been taking place here around the controversy of the removal of the monument, PRO Gainesville, the opposition and counter protesters' efforts to keep the monument. And there's been a lot of misinformation, there's been a lot of confusion, I believe. And so my goal is not to, I'm not trying to further any further wedge the divide that exists. I want to find a unifier, a way to bring people together around a common thread and a common understanding. And I think the easiest way for that is to get rid of all the misinformation and get rid of the things that are not actually clear about the monument. So one thing that has to be, I think, very clear, I want all my friends and family to understand that my great-great-great-grandfather, who was active in the Great Hanging in Gainesville, Texas, he shot a man dead in the proceedings of the Great Hanging with a shotgun, used that same shotgun to go fight for the Confederacy under General Fitzhugh's regiment. He also is the Texas foot rifle. You could say I'm a son of the Confederacy as well as the Aztec Club. He fought in the war, marched 200 miles, whatever, to fight, and then fought all along this area. So my great-great-great-grandfather, his nephew, William Howard Jr., his brother, commissioned for this statue to be put up 109 years ago in 1911. Okay, so those of you that don't know, that's on my mother's side, not my father's side. If you've seen my father out here marching with PRO Gainesville, talking about why he believes the monument should be removed, that's on the Underwood side. My mom's side, my grandmother was a Howarth, all right? So my great-great-grandmother was Betty Fidelia Howarth, and she was a daughter of Harvey Howarth, who was active in the Great Hanging, okay? So I feel like I have a conversation to bring around this monument that not everybody has heard or considered this perspective. So that's first and foremost important to understand, that the man that commissioned this, his father literally left 300 orphans and 40 widows in Cook County. Okay, so if you're about to save the children and all that, understand that these people left orphans in this county, hung them in a lynch mob. Not just treason against the Confederacy, but the impetus of that treason was based on the petition of the Confederate Conscription Act, which exempted slave owners. So the Peace Party in Gainesville organized around protesting the Confederate draft because it exempted slave owners. And less than 10% of the county at that time was slave owners, but they were the ones that were active and involved in the proceedings of the Great Hanging. Abraham Lincoln became president, and it set off South Carolina and then the series of slave states that formed the Confederacy. And Texas eventually followed, and then you had the events here at the Great Hanging. So I think it's important to recognize that, to say that this monument is not racist, go read the articles of the Confederacy in relation to slavery and maintaining the peculiar institution of slavery, okay? You can't say that the Confederacy was not about maintaining slavery. Even if you want to call it a states versus federal rights argument, it's still a states versus federal rights argument over slavery, right? Human trafficking of people, okay? At the time when, go look at Lloyd Garrison's comments, or go look at Mexico at the time when you already had a president before the Civil War in Mexico that was African, indigenous, and Spanish ancestry, okay? That was unheard of here, particularly in North Texas. So Jim Crow, this was erected during the era of Jim Crow, and it represents an era of slavery. And even to this day, there's not a true representation of the minority voices that never even got to vote on the idea of erecting and putting this thing up. So that's really important to understand. The other thing to understand is nobody's talking about destroying history, right? So despite what anyone has said in, social media, there was no burning down of the courthouse, there's no damage of property, there's been no violence, you see? So there's a great opportunity for people, to come together, and I've talked to a lot of people that were on opposing sides of this issue that are now trying to find a middle ground, right? This is a nonpartisan issue. This is not a partisan political issue. You see what I'm saying? So people need to understand that the group that's organizing, even if there is a partisan bias, even if you want to look at through the history of Black Lives Matters and connect it to the 2016 elections and bring it up to the election, man, this isn't not Antifa of Portland, this isn't Seattle, this isn't DC, this isn't St. Louis, man, this is Gainesville, Texas, man. People are out here riding on a wave, a national wave of social justice and equality and conversations around social justice and equality to point out discrepancies in our national and in our local narratives. And this is one of them, that this monument represents a bygone era of slavery, erected during the era of Jim Crow, of which one of the largest Klan rallies in North Texas, just after the fact was there. All the way up into the 90s is still, shown at the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Union. We know that we need to make some changes. For all the All Lives Matter people, man, this group, PRO Gainesville, is out here marching, saying all lives matter the other day, but you didn't see that, you didn't hear that. You just hear Black Lives Matter and you get triggered.
Our lives matter! 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 No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
This monument doesn't have to be on county property that the county taxpayers are it should represent all people, and that's what the 14th Amendment was: equal protection and justice under the law, and the enforcement of the law equally. And that's all that really people want to see and have and feel, like there is a fair voice and not a bias in the law enforcement, in the institutions. And that's what I want you guys to understand. So what I'm looking for any friends and family that took the time to watch this video, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch it and to hear me out. I really want to know where the Confederates are. I want to know where the Patriots are. I want to know where the people that can make a real valid historical argument of where and how this monument is not racist, where and how and why it should stay based on facts. Bring some substance to the conversation. I want you to comment. I want you to share this with somebody that knows their history of North Texas, that knows their Confederate history, that understands, the 13th and the 14th Amendment, and understands how, this is not private property, it's a public property accountable to all people, okay? And the people of color in this county, black people, represent less than 5%. I think it's like 3.5% of the vote. So you'll never get an equal vote unless white folks that see and recognize
the original decisions to name those bases after Confederate generals, the 10 bases you're talking about in the Army, those were political decisions back in the 1910s and 20s and 30s and World War I, World War II time, for 100 years ago. And they're going to be political decisions today. The military equity here is divisiveness. And as you mentioned, cohesion. 43% of the United States military are minorities. And in the Army, for example, and these are Army bases you're talking about, we're up to 20+% African American, and in some units you'll see 30%. And for those young soldiers that go on to a base, a Fort Hood or a Fort Bragg or a Fort wherever named after a Confederate general, they can be reminded that that general fought for an institution of slavery that may have enslaved one of their ancestors.
Confederate veterans are not even recognized as veterans by the United States military. Look it up.
We've also got to take a hard look at the symbology, the symbols, things like Confederate flags and statues and bases and all that kind of stuff. The Confederacy, the American Civil War, was fought, and it was an act of rebellion. It was an act of treason at the time against the Union, against the Stars and Stripes, against the U.S. Constitution. And those officers turned their back on their oath.
And the wives of Confederate veterans received some benefits and pensions, and they marked unmarked gravestones of Confederate soldiers, but the U.S. government does not see Confederate veterans as veterans. They see them as traitors against the United States. So if you're a patriot of the United States and you recognize, oh, well, Trump is a Republican, and Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and he's the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln, some of you want to say, well, recognize that even he is saying, look, the bad cops is a problem.
When you see an event like that with the more than 8 minutes of horror, that's 8 minutes really of horror. It's a disgrace.
You know what I mean? Racism is a problem.
A White House official saying, quote, the president doesn't see the protesters as directly about him, which is accurate. It's a result of decades of racism in our country.
It is a symbolic issue, a symbolic conversation that should be had, that's gonna be had, and the future will continue to shed light. People that say, oh, it was there for 100 years and nobody said nothing. Because nobody even stopped to read and look at the inscription. Oh, home of tears, but let her bear this blazing to the end of time. No nation so white and fair, none fell so pure a crime. I mean, are you telling me that's not a blatantly racist reference to white supremacy and white supremacist law under, under Jim Crow segregation in the South? Representing the Confederate soldier that had to fight so that the slave owners could avoid the draft and not have to fight. So don't say you represent the soldiers, don't say you represent the people, and just represent this because you think Black Lives Matter is a George Soros conspiracy, or next thing you know, they're gonna wanna, if you listen to the county commissioners talking about, oh, they're gonna, we let them do this, then they're gonna wanna change Mount Rushmore. Well, Mount Rushmore ain't in Texas. It's not a Cook County Commissioner issue. Leave that up to Mount Rushmore. Oh, they're going to want to take George Washington off the dollar bill. Hey, man, there ain't no federal money being printed here in Cook County. That ain't an issue to Cook County residents. What this is an issue of people having representation and a voice in this county, and if you believe in them and you believe all lives matter, then you should stand in solidarity with the people that want to have this statue honorably removed to a safe location off public property where people can enjoy it for all its historical and heritage purposes. Nobody wants to destroy history. Nobody wants to destroy heritage. We just want to build a better, brighter future for the children, and one that's based around the truth, man. Great hanging wasn't taught fairly or unbiasedly or impartially in the school districts in this county or in this town for the 100 years that no one knew about the monument. No one knew that when William W.H. Howard Jr. and A.J. Merriweather petitioned this, they didn't know all the history of that, the Confederacy and the Declaration and all that stuff, and slave owners was exempted from the draft. Man, how can you respect that and honor that? So, that's why I stand in solidarity with PRO Gainesville and for the people that support the removal of the monument, irregardless of partisan politics, irregardless of who you're voting for or whatever, none of that, man. The statue just needs to go to private property. There's people willing to put up money. There's people willing to help it be done. But we need your support. Share this video, comment below. You tell me a good reason why you oppose the honorable removal of this monument from public to private property. I'd just like to hear that, please. This is Asher Underwood signing off. Shouts out to all my friends and family. Thank you for taking time to watch this, man. Holla.